The sun was a blistering eye in the sky, its heat a palpable thing, pressing down on the world like a heavy hand. Kalen wiped sweat from his brow, the cloth as hot as the air it passed through. The desert stretched out before him, a shimmering, endless expanse of gold and brown. It was a world that promised death as readily as life, a place where shadows were as precious as water. He had been a fool to take this contract. The reward was tempting, a fortune that could buy him a life beyond the scorching sun and endless sand. But as he looked out at the horizon, a horizon that seemed to mock his hopes, he wondered if the price would be too high. A ghost of a smile crept across his lips. Too high? He'd paid the price for everything in his life. This was just another chapter. A sudden shift in the wind carried a whisper, a name that sent a shiver down his spine. Zara. She was coming. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a mirage perhaps, or something more sinister. Then she materialized, a figure against the sky, as ethereal and otherworldly as the desert itself. Zara. Her skin was the color of old parchment, her eyes twin pools of midnight, and her hair, a cascade of silver, seemed to shimmer in the heat. She approached him with a languid grace, her footsteps making no sound on the sand. A scent of jasmine and something else, something wild and untamed, hung in the air around her. "Kalen," she said, her voice as soft as a desert breeze, "I believe we have a common goal." Kalen regarded her with a mixture of wariness and fascination. He'd heard tales of her power and her unpredictability. Some said she was a goddess, others a demon. "And what might that goal be, sorceress?" he countered, his voice as dry as the desert. Zara smiled, revealing teeth as white as winter snow. "The scepter, of course. The one they say can control the elements." Her eyes held a strange intensity. "I have need of it." Kalen raised an eyebrow. "And what makes you think I'd be willing to share the spoils of this quest?" "Because," she said, "you seek redemption, and I seek balance. Together, we may find what we're looking for." He studied her, the sun casting sharp shadows across her face, highlighting her high cheekbones and the angles of her jaw. "What's your angle, Zara?" "The prophecy," she began, her eyes scanning the horizon. "It speaks of a mercenary with a heavy heart, one who walks the line between light and shadow. That's you, Kalen. And it speaks of a sorceress with a tainted soul, one who wields the power of the ancients. That's me." Her words hung in the air, thick with the promise of something greater than the gold and jewels they sought. Kalen knew that prophecies were often twisted to suit the needs of the desperate, but he also knew that sometimes, just sometimes, there was truth to be found in the whispers of the sands. He made his decision. "All right," he said, extending a hand. "We'll find this scepter together. But remember, I'm not your knight in shining armor. I'm just a man with a sword and a thirst for coin." Zara took his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "And I'm not your damsel in distress," she replied, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "I'm a force of nature. Let's see how well we can survive each other." They set off into the black sands, their shadows stretching out behind them like dark serpents. The desert was a vast, unyielding stage for their alliance, a place where the line between friend and foe was as blurred as the horizon. As they marched, the air grew heavier with the scent of magic, the sand singing a soft, eerie tune beneath their boots. The heat was a living presence, a creature that breathed and whispered, urging them to turn back. But Kalen and Zara pushed on, driven by their own personal demons and the siren call of the scepter. The journey was fraught with danger, the desert throwing its worst at them. They encountered a nest of giant scorpions, their pincers glinting in the sunlight, and a sandstorm that seemed to have a malicious intent all its own. Each night, as they huddled around a small fire, sharing stories and sips of water, Kalen found himself watching Zara, her eyes reflecting the flames like twin stars. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of crimson and gold, they stumbled upon an ancient ruin, half buried by the relentless sands. It was a place of power, the air vibrating with an energy that made the hairs on Kalen's arms stand on end. "This is it," Zara murmured, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. "The scepter is here." They approached the ruins with caution, the silence of the desert seemingly holding its breath. The structure was grand, a testament to a civilization that had thrived in this desolate place. It was a maze of crumbling stones and arches, whispering secrets that had been lost to time. But as they delved deeper, they realized they were not alone. The air grew thick with the scent of ambition and the stench of treachery. Khal's bandits had found their trail, and now they waited, lurking in the shadows, ready to claim the scepter for themselves. Kalen's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword, the metal warm to the touch. "Looks like we've got company," he said, his voice low and steady. Zara nodded, her eyes darkening. "Let's not keep them waiting." The battle was swift and brutal, the sand stained with blood and sweat. Kalen's blade danced through the air, a silver streak cutting down Khal's men. Zara's magic crackled around her, summoning whirlwinds that sent sand and rocks hurtling into their attackers. Her power was wild, uncontainable, a force of nature that Kalen could only marvel at. Together, they fought back to back, a deadly synergy that none had anticipated. Each of Khal's bandits fell, one by one, until only the chieftain remained, his eyes alight with a fury that matched the setting sun. "You will not claim what is mine," he roared, drawing his own weapon, a curved blade that glinted with a dark enchantment. Kalen stepped forward, the weight of his sword feeling lighter with each step. "I fought worse than you, desert rat," he spat. Zara watched them, her eyes narrowed, as the two men circled each other. The air grew charged with tension, the very sands seeming to hold their breath. Then, with a snarl, Khal lunged. The fight was fierce, a dance of steel and sand. Kalen parried and thrust, his muscles singing with the rhythm of combat, while Khal's blade whispered promises of death. But Kalen had the edge of desperation, the need to redeem his name. With a final, powerful swing, he cleaved through Khal's guard, his sword sinking deep into the chieftain's chest. Khal's eyes widened in shock, and then the light went out of them. As the body hit the ground, Zara felt a strange pang of regret. This was not the end she had envisioned, but perhaps it was the end they needed. They pushed deeper into the ruins, the scepter's power growing stronger with each step. It was a chamber of ancient beauty, the walls adorned with intricate carvings that told a story of power and loss. The scepter lay upon an altar, a simple rod of polished metal with runes that shimmered in the fading light. It called to them, a siren song that resonated in their very bones. Zara reached for it, her hand trembling. Kalen watched her, his heart racing. The prophecy had led them here, but what awaited them now? As her fingertips brushed the cool metal, the world around them shifted. The walls of the chamber grew transparent, revealing the desert night and the stars above. The sands parted, revealing a staircase that descended into the earth, beckoning them to continue their quest. With a deep breath, Zara took the scepter, its power humming through her. The air grew colder, the shadows darker. Kalen met her gaze, his eyes hard. "We're not done yet," he said. Together, they descended into the earth, into the heart of the desert's secrets, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The sands whispered their names, eager to see how their story would unfold. The staircase was steep and narrow, carved into the very bones of the world, and as they descended, the air grew thick with the scent of ancient magic and decay. The chamber at the bottom was vast, a cavern that had swallowed the light of the stars. The sands had retreated here, leaving behind a space that felt as if it had been waiting for them for an eternity. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop it, a crystal that pulsed with the same power that thrummed through the scepter. Zara stepped forward, her eyes locked on the crystal. This is the true source of the scepter's power," she murmured. Kalen followed, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. "What now?" Zara paused, her hand hovering over the crystal. "Now," she said, her voice low and solemn, "we decide if we can wield this power without letting it consume us." The crystal flared to life, casting eerie shadows across the cavern walls. A sudden gust of wind swept through, lifting the sands into a frenzy. Kalen felt the scepter's power resonate within him, a hum that seemed to speak of the very essence of the desert itself. The walls of the chamber began to shake, and from the corners of his eyes, he caught glimpses of figures moving in the shadows. The ancient guardians of the chamber had been roused from their slumber, their forms shifting and twisting in the dim light. Zara's eyes went wide with terror and wonder as she felt the power of the crystal meld with her own. "We must be careful," she warned, her voice strained. "The prophecy speaks of balance. If we tip the scales too far, we may bring about the very destruction we seek to prevent." The guardians closed in, their forms solidifying into monstrous beings of sand and stone. Their eyes gleamed with malice, their teeth sharp as shards of glass. Kalen raised his sword, his heart pounding. "Then let's not keep them waiting," he said with a grim smile. The battle was unlike any Kalen had ever faced. The guardians were relentless, their bodies shifting and reforming with every blow he dealt. Zara's magic raged around them, a tempest that sent sand and rocks flying. Through the chaos, Kalen saw the crystal pulsing in time with their hearts, drawing from their very souls. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, and the guardians grew stronger with each passing moment. And then, as if the desert itself had decided the fate of their quest, the sands parted once more, revealing a figure that seemed to be carved from the very night. It was a creature of darkness and power, a creature that had no place in the world of the living. "The price of power," it whispered, its voice a chilling hiss. "It is time to pay the toll." Zara's grip on the scepter tightened, her knuckles white. "No," she shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber. "We will not be your pawns." The creature's laughter filled the cavern, a sound that sent shivers down Kalen's spine. "You dare to defy me?" it said, its form growing larger, more terrifying. With a roar, Kalen charged, his sword a beacon of light in the darkness. The creature's eyes widened in surprise as he brought the blade down, shattering the crystal that bound it. The chamber erupted in a maelstrom of sand and shadows as the creature was banished back to the abyss from which it came. The scepter's power waned, and the guardians crumbled into dust. Breathless, Kalen turned to Zara, who stood there, her eyes wide with shock. "What have we done?" she murmured. He took her hand, his grip firm and steady. "We've survived," he said, his voice gruff. "And that's all that matters now." The desert had tested them, but together, they had proven themselves. As they climbed back into the night, the scepter in hand, Kalen couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell within his chest. They had bested Kaal and his band of cutthroats, conquered the ancient guardians, and denied the creature of shadow its prize. Yet, the journey had only just begun. The air outside the ruins was cooler, the stars seemingly closer in the vast, unobstructed sky. Zara clutched the scepter tightly, the power within it thrumming against her palm. "The prophecy," she murmured, "it's not over." Kalen nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We've got more than just gold to deal with now," he said, his tone grim. "The scepter's power, it's going to draw more than just bandits." They traveled through the night, the sands whispering secrets that only the two of them could hear. The desert was a fickle ally, granting them moments of respite before throwing more challenges in their path. The silence between them grew thick, filled with the weight of what they had uncovered and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. As dawn approached, the sky lightened from a deep blue to a fiery orange. They stumbled upon an oasis, a shimmering jewel in the desert's crown. Palm trees whispered in the early breeze, and the sound of water was as sweet as the promise of life itself. They stopped to rest, drinking deeply from the clear, cool pool. The water washed away the grime of battle and the fear of the night's encounter. As they sat, their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the barriers they had built around themselves crumbled. "Why are you really here, Kalen?" Zara asked, her voice soft. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "To make amends," he said, his eyes dark with memories. "For a mission that went wrong, a village that paid the price." Her gaze searched his, understanding in her eyes. "And you think this artifact will grant you that?" "I think," he said, his voice gruff, "that it's the closest I'll ever get to making things right." Zara was quiet for a long moment, her eyes on the scepter. "And what of the balance you seek?" He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "What balance?" The balance of power, she said, her eyes searching his. The prophecy speaks of it. If we're to prevent destruction, we must be careful who we trust with this scepter. Kalen nodded slowly. We're in this together, he said. We'll find a way to make it right. The sun rose, casting long shadows across the sand. They mounted their weary steeds and continued their journey, the scepter a beacon before them. The desert was vast and unforgiving, but they had faced its dangers and lived to tell the tale. The prophecy had brought them together, but it was their shared burden of guilt and the hope of redemption that bound them now. The horizon grew brighter, hinting at the trials that awaited them. Other treasure hunters, drawn by the whispers of the scepter's power, would soon be on their heels. And there were still those who sought to harness its power for their own ends, to tip the scales in their favor and plunge the world into chaos. But for now, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the desert was theirs. And with each step they took, they left their past behind, forging a new path into the heart of the Black Sands. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Kalen and Zara would face it together, as allies, as equals, as guardians of a power that could either save or destroy the world. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories, give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.